All right, we're back from a week off, and it's time to dive into another game week here with the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Pitt's got Louisville on Saturday. That is a huge game. Not going to say the whole season hinges on this, but boy, howdy, does a whole lot of it hang in the balance here. The problem is, when you blow a game like they blew against West Virginia, you lose a win opportunity. I mean, I guess every game you lose is a win opportunity missed, but that was a game that could have been won, should have been won, and if they had won, we'd be all having a much different conversation here as Pitt's sitting at 3-0, getting ready to host Louisville. But when you blow an opportunity to win, a game you should win, and a game you're in position to win, now, you only have so many of those. The numbers are limited. You have a lot fewer of those available to you throughout the course of a season. And so when you waste one of those opportunities, that creates much more pressure to A, not waste any more opportunities, but B, maybe steal one. See if you can get a win that, I don't know, I don't want to say like, get a win in a game you should have lost or you'd be expected to lose or steal one or something like that. But the reality is, I mean, that's kind of where you're at. Like, you need to, you're going to have to win a game that you might not be favored in. And, as of yesterday, Pitt was a touchdown underdog against Louisville at home. That's ugly stuff. And that means it's far more challenging because you wasted an opportunity last Saturday. We all know about that. We all saw that. We all talked about it. We talked about it after the game 2 weeks ago. We talked about it all week on the Morning Pit. We talked about it on the live show on Wednesday night. We're going to talk about it again, for sure, throughout this week. We'll talk to Pat Narduzzi about it today when he has his press conference, his game week press conference. And I'm sure we'll reference it throughout the week. But now, Pitt's a quarter of the way into the season. And while I think it is hyperbole to say the season is hanging in the balance, there's a whole lot riding on this game here on Saturday against Louisville, just like there is every game going forward. So after a week off, what are the biggest questions? What are the biggest storylines? What are the biggest topics? What are the most important things for Pitt to focus on? What did they need to focus on during their week off? What are they going to have to focus on this week? And what are going to be the keys to beating Louisville? Not necessarily in terms of a matchup against Louisville. We'll talk about that as the week goes on. But for Pitt, what does Pitt need to focus on itself to get better for this game on Saturday and the rest of the games to come? We got a lot to talk about on a huge week, the Monday of a huge week for the Pitt football program. We'll get it started right here on the Morning Pit, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's Monday. It's the Morning Pit. It's YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com hanging out with you this morning. Hope you had a good weekend. It was a beautiful weekend. Really nice couple of days there. But now it's time to get back down to business. Now it's time to get focused on Pitt football, whether you want to or not. Not that anybody really lost sight of Pitt football or lost the focus on Pitt football. I mean, I think we were all thinking about it and talking about it. Certainly the message boards were buzzing all weekend, and there's a lot of conversation, and most of it hinged around how the season is plummeting to a brutal and painful death for everyone involved. And that may or may not be the case. But the thing I keep coming back to, the question I keep coming back to, and this is probably something I'll say some version of every day this week on the Morning Pit and on the live show on Wednesday night, and probably in the postgame show as we reflect back on it. And this will be my first question or topic or theme, whatever you want to call it, facing Pitt this weekend or this week. And I think it's a question all Pitt fans have to ask themselves or can ask themselves if they want to, and maybe they already feel like they have the answer. Pitt football, okay? Let me think of the best way. Does the 2025 Pitt football team stink, or did they just stink on that day in Morgantown? Are they a bad team, or did they have a bad day? And I think probably for a lot of people listening to this, I mean, because I think I read your opinions on the message boards and social media and everything, you think it's the former, that they are a bad team, that they stink. And I know there's often a sort of instinctual reaction after a loss, particularly an ugly loss, a bad loss, to say they're probably not going to win another game. And you might be right. I was one of the doubters of the doubters, after the SMU game last year. Then somebody, some people would say, oh, they're going to lose out. They're not going to win a single game. I'm like, come on, give me a break. They started 7-0. They got some injuries, but they'll survive it. I mean, obviously that didn't work out. My thing that I keep coming back to with the West Virginia game, and this question of, do they stink or did they just stink on that day? Are they bad or did they have a bad day? I guess that's a better way to say it. I like asking it that way. Are they a bad team or do they have a bad day? I don't think there's any doubt that they had a bad day. Does that necessarily mean that they are or are not a bad team? And my thing that I keep coming back to with that game is one of the biggest things that we talked about all week was the missed opportunities within the game. And you could go down the list. We went down the list so many times. I'm not going to recount it all of Eli Holstein, like the 7 passes he needed to make that he just whiffed on, the 14 penalties, the ill-timed penalties, the way that team kept shooting itself in the foot. There were 10 opportunities to win that game, 12 opportunities to win that game. They didn't get blown out. They didn't look like they, didn't belong on the field with West Virginia. As a matter of fact, I still maintain I think they're the better team. I think they have the better roster. And, if you played the game, I hate this, but if you played the game 10 times, they win 6, 7, 8 times, somewhere around there. I really do think that. And I, it's not a roster that is without holes. It certainly has holes. It has gaps. It has issues. But on the whole, I think they are talented enough that they should beat that West Virginia team most times. They would have to shoot themselves in the foot repeatedly to lose to that West Virginia team. And that's what they did. And that I don't mean to take any credit away from West Virginia. It's not what I'm trying to do. I don't want to incite all the West Virginia fans who watched my videos last week. I appreciate you. Salute to our brothers and sisters to the South. But I ultimately think Pitt was the better team. They imploded. And I think when you look at how they lost, that even if you want to say, oh, West Virginia ran the ball down their throat and crushed them in the fourth quarter and ran all over them. I mean, they kind of did. They kind of also had 37 rushing yards in the fourth quarter. West Virginia did. They ended up with 158 total yards because they got 121 passing yards. But they did push them around and got some big key gains on the ground, but it wasn't quite it wasn't the mauling and manhandling that it sort of felt like it was in the moment. And again, as we said a million times, like Pitt's defense gave up 2 touchdowns through the first 59 minutes and 49 seconds. They needed one more stop, but the defense wasn't the reason they lost that game. The defense was fairly solid, fairly stout, and I think indicative of what level they will probably play at all season. But they need a little more out of the offense. That's what it ultimately comes down to. And it's funny because I was looking at Pro Football Focus, and I think generally as a policy, and we've had this policy even before it was cool, that we just don't pay much attention to the grades. The grades are not what interests me on Pro Football Focus. It's the pressures and the targets and the snaps and all those things. But it is interesting. I'm looking at there's a page that has the schedule, game by game for Pitt and the grades in each category overall, and then overall offense, passing, pass blocking, receiving, running, run blocking, and then overall defense, run defense, tackling, pass rush, coverage, and all this stuff. And you could compare game to game, and there's one giant, and it's all color coded, right? If you're really good, it's blue. If you're, next level down is green, next level down is yellow. The very bottom though is red. And if you have red, that is bad. That means that's an area that you were bad. And when you look at all of these games together, you can see them all in front of them. I'm looking at it right now. The grade for Pitt's passing game against West Virginia is by far the lowest grade any single area of the team received over the course of its first 3 games. That's the only one that's in red of really, really bad. But we all know that, and believe me, we'll talk more about the passing game in a second. My point overall is, you might be right. If you're sitting there saying this team is terrible and they're going to lose out, you might be right. That is one possible outcome that could be out there. And I think we learned after last year, you can't rule out the possibility of losing out. or only winning 4 games or something like that. I still believe this team is better than that. I still think they're capable of more than that. They obviously have some pretty important things to figure out, and we'll ask a few of those questions today and even more of them throughout the week, but I still think they're better than that. And I think the West Virginia game, if you want to find any way to spin it, it's that they had, like I said, 10, 12 chances to win that game, and they just blew it. They stepped on their own feet multiple times, right? Over and over and over again. And like, you can run down the list like we did all week last week of different times that, like, if this one play goes the other way, if Pitt doesn't trip over its own feet just on this one snap, they win the game. And so that makes me feel like, no, they're not necessarily a worse team than West Virginia. No, they're not as bad as they looked, because they were right there. They put themselves in that position, and it wasn't due, and they didn't lose because of, a talent disparity or, an inability to play toe-to-toe. I mean, they lost by shooting themselves in the foot over and over and over and over and over again. And so I think, at least for now, I'm willing to sit back and say they're not a bad team. They had a bad day. Maybe this Saturday will disprove that. And we'll sit down in the shot of the game. We'll be like, hey, you were right. They're bad. Or maybe we'll have a different take on it. We'll see what happens after Saturday. Now, I buried the lead. I said that was like the first question I'm kind of asking. The biggest question that's being asked this week. It's the question we asked all week last week. And it's, like, there is no bigger question right now. It's the quarterback position. I don't know what the solution is. I don't want to be the guy who sits back and says, you got to play the backup. Play the backup. The backup's better. The backup's better. The backup's a better option. We've heard so much about him. We saw him in the spring game. And by golly, if you see it in the spring game, it's the real deal. I don't want to sit back and do that. But there are certain realities at play here. Like overthrowing Desmond Reed up the sideline, overthrowing Justin Holmes up the sideline, overthrowing Raphael Williams for a first down, putting it in the dirt to Kenny Johnson for a first down, throwing an interception at the goal line that's just bad, throwing it behind Kenny Johnson on a screen pass once, doing it again and only getting 7 yards out of the play because Kenny Johnson pulled you out of it. Like I said, I wasn't going to recount all 7 of those passes, but I mean, like, those were bad mistakes. And the reality is Eli Holstein did not look great consistently through the first 2 games against Duquesne and Central Michigan either. And you add that on top of the things we heard about Eli Holstein coming out of training camp. And you add that on top of the things we heard about Eli Holstein coming out of spring camp. And then you put it all together, and I'm not just coming up with this stuff right now. I mean, these were things we said even in the offseason. And you consider how he played last year and what he did. And I think he's very much a player of extremes. And unfortunately, those extremes, sometimes the bad extremes offset the good, where he's capable of these spectacular things, these amazing plays, where you say, wow. But that the routine, consistent moving the ball down the field, driving down the field, picking up first downs, he's struggling with that right now. So much so that I'm putting stars in my legal pad when he has a drive where the first couple passes are like 5 and 7 yard passes to pick up first downs rather easily. Like, wow, look at this. Moving the ball in a routine fashion. He's struggling with that. He's struggling to get accuracy with his passes. He's struggling to put good touch. He's struggling under the pressure, which we'll talk about in a second. And a question that, I think Pat Narduzzi has to answer. Cade Bell should answer it as well. I don't think he's going to. I'm guessing he won't be talking to the media this week. They kind of schedule it out when different coaches, assistants talk to the media throughout the course of the season. And we already had Cade Bell once during the season, so I don't know if we'll get him again. Either way, it's a question for Pat Narduzzi. And actually, this is a question more for Narduzzi than it is for Bell. Because 2 years ago, we witnessed Pitt go through a situation where they stuck with one quarterback for far too long. Well past the point of it being obvious to anyone watching. including people who either wear a Pitt polo during the games or those who sit in the stands in the game or those who sit up in the press box during the game. And we were told it was left to one person to make the decision on when to change quarterbacks until it reached a point where another person who happens to be that guy's boss stepped in and said, we have to do something different here. Okay? 2 years ago, Pat Narduzzi made the call. Pat Narduzzi said to Frank Cignetti, we need to change quarterbacks. And during an off week, ahead of a game against Louisville, a weird bit of synergy or synchronicity or whatever the word is for it, parallel. And they changed quarterbacks. And they ended up getting a big win. And the guy they went to wasn't necessarily good, but he was an improvement. And they ended up getting a big win out of it. 2 years later, has Pat Narduzzi's approach with quarterbacks and the quarterback personnel decisions changed? And did it change in light of what went down 2 years ago? These were questions that need to be asked. Well, I mean, like, those are not the questions that Pat Narduzzi and Kate Bell needed to be asking last week and heading into this week. The questions they needed to be asking is sitting down and saying, okay, is what's going wrong with Eli Holstein fixable? And if it is it fixable short term or is it fixable long term? And actually saying that a better way, can it be fixed quickly or is it going to take more time? Because I'm not sure you have a lot of time. Like, you need to get this fixed as quickly as possible. And if the quickest fix can come from changing the approach with Eli Holstein, either the game planning, the play calling, the play design, whatever it might be, and changing the information that he has to process out there, or if the quickest fix is going to another quarterback, whether it's Cole Gonzalez or Mason Heinschel. That question needed to be asked, deeply researched and studied and answered by now. Really, the conclusion should have been drawn by now. We'll see what Pat Narduzzi says about that. I have a feeling a lot of the questions are going to be about the quarterback position when we talk to him today for his weekly press conference. Should be an interesting one. We'll have video right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. The other big thing, and really those are the two biggest questions. I think, in sort of in broad terms, in specific terms, there's the question of the quarterback position. In broad terms, there's the question of that first question I asked. Is Pitt a bad team or do they have a bad day? Because that one's pretty important too. But it's also kind of a big, broad question that encompasses a lot of different areas. The other thing I was going to mention today is just the offensive line, but I think we have time to talk about that this week, and actually the defense as well. I've got a few areas I want to hit, but look, we got Morning Pitt episodes all week long, right? These are the biggest things right now. You got to figure out the quarterback situation. Good luck with that. And then, who are you? What team are you? So this is an interesting week. It's a big week. It's a pivotal week. And this game against Louisville on Saturday is going to be a big one and a pivotal one. So I'm looking forward to it. I assume you are as well. I'm looking forward to talking to Pat Narduzzi today at noon. Like I say, we'll have live updates on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. We'll have the video and transcript and everything posted later. And tomorrow we'll break down some of the things Narduzzi said. We've been doing that with the 5 clips from Narduzzi or 4 clips or however many it is. We'll do that in the Morning Pitt tomorrow. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you had a great weekend. It's game week, everybody, so get your game face on, whatever that might look like. And, have a good Monday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.